Muy buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kimberly Silverio Bautista, a graduating senior at California State University, Northridge. I'm currently double majoring in journalism broadcast and Chicano and Chicana studies with a minor in Spanish language journalism. It is my pleasure to convey you for the final portion of the Graduation Initiative 2025 Symposium here in Sacramento, California. In addition to serving on a panel with fellow CSU students during a breakout session earlier today, I am also here to introduce our final speaker of the conference, Dr. Lande Ajose, Senior Policy Advisor for Higher Education to Governor Gavin Newsom. Dr. Ajose has a wealth of knowledge on student success from her various roles in higher education, ranging from most recently serving as the Executive Director of California Competes, a non-partisan policy research organization focused on the challenges facing California's higher education system and the actions policymakers must take to address them. And serving on the California Student Aid Commission, to her work on community college success with MDRC and the James Irvine Foundation. I'm excited to invite Dr. Ajose to the stage to provide insight into her vision for California higher education.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for sticking it out. I mean, it's the very end, and you're still here. I appreciate you having me. I appreciate the invitation from the CSU system and Chancellor White. Although I want to say, parenthetically, there's nothing at all intimidating about following the governor, so thanks for that. Nevertheless, on behalf of the governor and our administration, I'm delighted to be with you today to talk a little bit more about our vision for higher education for the state. And I want to start by thanking those of you in the audience for your tireless work. I mean, it's very clear to me that the work that you do each and every day is what contributes to the robust system of higher education that we have and what makes, higher education accessible for all students. When I was a doctoral student and writing my dissertation, I had a professor who told me that ultimately every dissertation is a personal story. So in talking with you about our priorities for higher education in California and the implications for innovation, completion, and a diverse democracy, quite a title given, thank you. I thought I'd start by channeling Michael this morning and sharing some of my own personal story, because I think in many ways my story is very much a quintessential California story. I am the daughter of immigrants. Both of my parents immigrated here in the 1960s to seek higher education, and they met as optimistic 20-year-olds in Chicago, having both of their families have sent them from Nigeria to go to college. Unfortunately, their love story didn't quite turn out as planned, and before long, I was the daughter of a single mom who moved to California, who had bouts of public assistance, and as she tried to get on her feet, never completed that 4-year degree dream. While she didn't reach her goal, she was bound and determined to ensure that her kids were on a strong academic path, and she was willing to make sacrifices to do it. For years, she slept on the couch, forgoing a bed, so that my brother and I could each have our own rooms, our own beds, and a good night's sleep. And after she became a respiratory therapist, she would work the night shift to earn a little bit of cash, a little bit of extra cash, so that she could send us to Catholic and then private schools, because she thought that they offered the highest quality education. The biggest sacrifice came when I was in 10th grade. My mother took a trip back to Nigeria to visit her family, and while she was there, her passport and green card were stolen. Without credentials, she couldn't come back. But she chose to allow me to stay here because she wanted me to achieve the dream that she hadn't. I share this with you not because the story is all that remarkable, although sometimes even I'm stunned that I lived through it, but because it paints the improbability of my life. It paints a picture of the improbability of my life after that. To be clear, I was a young black girl, right, raised by a single mom who'd been on public assistance, and because I was in the country alone, my path to adulthood eventually was routed through the foster care system before emancipating at the age of 18. By all measures, my circumstances suggested that college might not be in my future, and certainly not as a full-time student, and certainly not as a 4-year institution. And yet that's exactly what we're called to do in higher education, to ensure that everyone has meaningful access to quality post-secondary education. But that's not all. We must also ensure that the opportunity to be educated does not just reproduce the historic wealth and inequity deeply rooted in our history as Americans, but instead provides the kind of economic and social mobility that is deeply rooted in our ideals as Americans. This, in my view, strikes at the heart of education for a diverse democracy, to ensure that our institutions are serving students and the public good. My path into this work was not only informed by my personal experience, but also by our recent economic and political history. Everyone in this room probably remembers the economic boom early in this century, which was followed by the end of the decade with the nation's most gripping economic recession. Often cited in the news were numerous stats that the United States was lagging behind other industrialized nations. Back around that time, a former colleague of mine shared with me an advertisement that was either in The Economist or the New York Times, I'm not quite sure which, but it was an advertisement for Ontario, Canada, and it was luring employers to locate there. And their primary argument was, we have the highest percentage of adults with post-secondary degrees in the G7. Now, despite Ontario's odd sense that they were a part of the G7, what they clearly understood is that businesses locate in places that have not only just a lot of highly educated people, but a concentration of highly educated people. In the 1960s, California emerged as an economic powerhouse, the envy of not just states, but of nations. We've been renowned for the richness and diversity of our robust regional economies. We're at the top of our game in agriculture, natural resources, shipping and logistics, the entertainment industry, and of course, the computer industry. Our state's GDP stands at $2.4 trillion, representing 13% of the nation's GDP, and of course, placing us as the fifth largest economy in the world in terms of scale and the impact of our economy. We are indeed a nation state. We came to occupy that important place in our world's economy in large part because of our higher education system. The implementation of the Master Plan for Higher Education in 1960 expanded access to post-secondary education and focused our colleges and universities on their distinct roles that have contributed to the unprecedented economic growth and strength of California's vibrant communities. We've seen how the world has also changed in the past few decades. In the places where you have creativity and industriousness, the entrepreneurship that comes from training and higher education, good jobs are created. And those good jobs create strong communities, and those strong communities contribute to more education. It creates a cycle of upwards mobility and improvement and opportunity that benefits students and families and communities and regions and reaches people from all backgrounds. However, we also know that California is threatened as an economic leader because our colleges and universities, both 2- and 4-year, are not producing enough highly skilled graduates. Among the states, despite our economic prowess, California ranks 22nd in terms of the proportion of adults ages 25 to 64 with an associate's degree or above. And compared to other industrialized nations, the United States ranks 13th. There's no way we move up in our rankings without the deliberate commitment that you all are making to student success. Our national ranking relative to the size of our economy is what led President Obama 10 years ago to set a goal for the United States to create an additional 5 million more degrees and credentials by 2025 than we were already on track to produce. Getting that critical mass is what President Obama's goal was all about, returning our country to its place as number one in terms of the people with post-secondary education credentials. He declared that an education attainment goal for the nation, and a number of states have subsequently adopted goals and plans of their own. Surprisingly, though, California has not, as you heard the governor say this morning. In fact, beset by financial crisis, we took a step in the opposite direction. We zeroed out of the budget the California Post-Secondary Education Commission, the only agency with any purview over how the segments of higher education in our state work together. In the wake of that decision, we saw tuition increases, we saw mounting debt, we saw capacity constraints. And now, added to some of those challenges, are the technological advances that are reshaping how we think about and deliver education. And while the CSU has made significant improvements in increasing graduation rates, particularly and most notably the 4- and 2-year rates, the 4-year graduation rates and the 2-year graduation rates among transfer students, as a state we've made slower progress on increasing the proportion of Californians with degrees and credentials. These are among the significant issues our administration is now faced with addressing. The governor's 2019-2020 budget offers the best insight into our initial thinking about how to tackle many of these issues. As an administration, we're working to promote access, increase affordability, and improve college completion. Last year, we increased the higher education funding across all of our segments by $1.63 billion. And as you heard this morning, we made an investment of $76.6 million in the CSU alone, representing one of the largest annual investments in the system in state history. Where did the resources go, you may ask? They went to expanding access, where, for example, we increased the number of seats at the CSU by 10,000. We provided these as ongoing dollars to ensure that students are able to get through college and that we'll have more seats in our institutions to chip away at that 5 million degree gap. But I will admit that we did it with strings attached. Both the UC and the CSU were asked to hold tuition constant this year, and we were pleased when those institutions agreed to do so and that tuition remained flat. Those dollars also went to improving completion, where, for example, the governor appropriated an additional $75 million into graduation 2025, $45 million in ongoing funds, and the balance in one-time spending. We're clear now that college going is not just about getting into college, but it's about getting through college. We know that far too many students are spending far too long trying to obtain their degrees, and while they do, the queue for those who are trying to get into the door gets longer and longer. I believe that Chancellor White told me yesterday that for every percentage point by which the graduation rate rises, that creates another 2,500 seats. And that goes a very long way in terms of addressing the capacity constraints faced by our institutions. Just as important as graduation rates, though, is improving time to degree. It's become quite commonplace to talk about 6-year graduation rates at 4-year institutions. I myself have 3 children. And I can tell you that personally, I'd rather pay for 12 years of college rather than 18. I know that sounds trite, but that's actually what we're talking about when we telegraph to students and families that they should be that they can complete a degree in much longer than the period of time that they anticipate. This is another reason why your 8-point increase in 4-year graduation rates and your 10-point increase in 2-year transfer rates since 2025 is really remarkable. Our budget this year also went to increasing affordability, where, for example, we allocated $6 million to the CSU to obtain summer Cal grants so that students can take summer coursework. Our augmentations to the budget included increasing the Cal Grant B living expenses so that student parents can now earn as much as $6,000, up from $1,672. Think about what an extra few $1,000s can mean to a parent who is juggling rent and daycare and their own education. It probably would have meant a lot to my mom when she was trying to get through hers. The focus on underserved populations within our higher education system was clearly informed by the governor's 8 years serving on the CSU Board of Trustees. What was clear to me in my first year of working with the governor is his keen awareness of the barriers that students face and completing their degrees. That's why you saw $7 million set aside for legal services for vulnerable immigrant students. You saw $6.5 million set aside for rapid rehousing. You saw $3.3 million set aside for formerly incarcerated students, and over $15 million set aside to address student basic needs. A fundamental commitment of our administration is to address California's cost crisis, and nowhere does that show up more perversely than in the number of students who are homeless or living in their cars or frequenting one of the many food pantries which shamefully exist on all of our campuses. Our other proposal for financial aid is to acknowledge that we need to do much better at serving Californians who didn't attend college within a year of graduating from high school. And I'm proud that we increased the number of competitive Cal Grants for these students by 63%, from 2,500 to 41,000 grants. Our thinking about higher ed goes beyond what is happening within the walls of the academy, of course. And in August, we launched the Council for Post-Secondary Education, on which we're lucky enough to have Chancellor White serve. The council was established as an independent consultative body so that the governor could think about the economic and social impact of higher education in the state. Joined by representatives of business and labor, and together with the system leaders, we will examine issues related to future capacity, enrollment planning, community college transfer and general education, and the coordination of our systems at both the state and the regional levels, and make recommendations to the governor for potential action. And then, just last month, we launched the Commission on the Future of Work. This is an explicit effort to marry our work on post-secondary education, employment, and economic development to our commitment to the goal of economic mobility and social mobility and economic growth. The commission, upon which Dr. Soraya Kohli is serving, is considering the role of automation and technological innovation in changing the nature of work, now and into the future. As a state, we are considering what we can do to restore the social compact around work and set the conditions for all workers to be employed in jobs that offer fair pay, dignity, and respect. The good news is that there seems to be an emerging consensus among our commissioners that the robots are not coming to eat our jobs. Instead, what we're thinking is that most of the routine tasks in many jobs are being automated, and that jobs in demand will be those jobs that require critical thinking, better decision-making, collaboration, creativity, communication, and good judgment. Connecting people to these kinds of jobs is one of the culminating ideas behind the educational enterprise itself. And our administration, along with you, are making it possible and realistic for Californians to live out that part of the American dream. The purpose of all of our efforts, enrollment funding, student success, financial aid, the council, the Commission on the Future of Work, all of it, is to live into California's promise made in the Master Plan for Higher Education that guaranteed that every student would have access. And furthermore, the implicit promise that each of those students would also complete with a degree or a certificate in hand. The entire enterprise of college access and completion in California is based on the premise that a quality education is offered and obtained, that choice and opportunity are preserved, and that at the end of the day, students are left better off than they were before. At the same time, we are quite aware that students don't educate themselves. They go to your institutions, they need your caring faculty, and your advisors and your facilities, and that's why we are in the business of making investments in your institutions, including what will be on the ballot, $2 billion to invest in campus facilities. So, having said all of that, the governor has encouraged those of us in the administration to think more innovatively and more creatively about how to address the persistent problems facing each of our respective policy areas. And so as a result, I thought I would share with you very briefly, before I wrap up, the thought exercise that I've been going through as the governor has put that challenge in front of us. That thought exercise really has to do with this question. What would happen if we treated healthcare policy the way in which we treat higher education policy? What would we learn about our approach? And perhaps what would we learn about what needs to change? Well, the first thing that we would recognize is that for the first 5 years of life, healthcare would be informal. You'd rely on those closest to you, right, to assess your health, without any guarantee that you'd see a healthcare professional to understand what your fundamental characteristics were. Only the most privileged, in fact, might see a healthcare professional before the age of 5. Lack of formal access to healthcare, not surprisingly, would have very significant implications for public health outcomes down the road. If we treated healthcare the way we treat education, people wouldn't be entitled to education until age 5, but then things would really open up. In fact, you'd be able to get your basic vaccinations because finally healthcare services would become an entitlement from ages 6 to 18. Compulsory healthcare would be offered for 9 months of the year, right? And then treatment would not necessarily be based on your diagnosis. Irrespective of what your body needed, you'd have to go to the prescribed treatment room. Have the flu? Too bad. It's pancreatic screening month. There'd also be implications for quality. We'd be able to predict the quality of healthcare services by zip code. Wealthier communities would have much better doctors, folks in private practices with specialties, while less affluent communities might have fewer providers themselves, perhaps those with less quality, maybe those with the least experience, and might have poorer outcomes. And by the time a child was 8 years old, based on their health status, we could pretty accurately predict the likelihood for that child to live a long life, or be riddled with disease, or die young. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. And by the age of 18, access to healthcare would suddenly become a little erratic. Only the healthiest and wealthiest among us would continue to have high-quality access, while many others would either go without seeing a provider or go long periods before having to access the system again. Furthermore, healthcare services would really be designed for those young and virulent 18-year-olds, not those who didn't get access at 18, but wanted to return and have access at 25 or 30 or older. And then what would happen after that? If we treated healthcare the way we treat education, formal visits to a healthcare provider would stop altogether. Only the most motivated, the richest, or most conscientious of us might see a doctor or two, but the vast majority of us would have little access beyond our 30s, with our health slowly declining over time. What we know about healthcare is that it's not a one-and-done proposition. A clean bill of health at 18 does not save you from sickness and disease. So too, completing a high school education or college is no guarantee that you'll be a ready, healthy, strong participant in the workforce. What we know is that one's healthcare needs change over the course of one's lifetime, and so too does one's educational needs. The question for us in Sacramento is, what is the role of the state in thinking about that modern-day educational system? You all know that California has all these amazing statistics: 5th largest economy in the world, 1st in new business starts, #1 in manufacturing, 1st in venture capital. Our macroeconomics are very strong. We are also facing a cost crisis in housing, in healthcare, and education. We have staggering levels of wealth and income inequality. 1 in 5 kids lives in poverty. 130,000 people in this state are homeless. A moral, social, and economic crisis. We need to make sure that the economy is working for everyone and that we have inclusive, resilient, sustainable, and equitable growth. When we look at our jobs, what we see is that there is a hollowing out of middle-skill jobs. While training and upskilling workers has been our go-to approach for low-skill workers, workers are limited by the jobs that actually exist in the labor market. And so a focus on skills alone cannot address some of the underlying factors that are happening in the labor market. We know that workers have become much more productive, but that their wages have not matched that increased productivity. Increasing skills without addressing the factors that are driving wages down is an incomplete strategy. We also know that while all this is happening, we have the most skilled workforce in our history. And who do you think makes less than $15 an hour in California? More than 1 in 3 Californians earn less than $15 an hour, and that varies by race, by place, and by gender. And shockingly and disturbingly, half of all Latino workers in this state earn less than $15 an hour. But what is probably surprising is that 1 in 5 Californians with a college degree earn less than $15 an hour. The solution is not in skills alone. The solution is also in us thinking about the structure of work. So taken together, what does all this mean? It means we need, at the state level, to find ways to address our capacity constraints so that we have fewer students turned away from campuses where they would like to pursue their education. It means that we must tackle the crucible of affordability, finding a way to address our students' total cost of attendance. We know that for, I think it's 8 of the last 9 years, tuition has remained flat, but affordability continues to soar. And the same things that make it hard for you and I to live in the state of California, the ridiculous cost of housing, the priciness of food, make it very difficult for students. And that's before you add things like the cost of books and transportation and parking. We have to address financial aid and college affordability, student needs and their food and housing insecurity. We need to promote and increase student success. And we must focus on our intersegmental needs, such as a longitudinal data system for the state and better segmental coordination. We are thinking about all of these issues and their relative priority as we determine how best to expend the state's significant yet limited resources. But investing in higher education means thinking about it a little bit more like healthcare. Parents should start planning while the child is in the womb and talking and reading and singing to their young ones, increasing their word acquisition by the age of 3. And as a state, we need to provide quality healthcare and pre-K programs. We need to offer flexible and adaptive high-quality K-12 education. We need to expose young people to careers, and we need to guarantee post-secondary access and college affordability to everyone. It also means recognizing that education will not be a straight line for all of us, that there will be on-ramps and off-ramps, that we should set aside resources for ongoing professional development and training, and that we need to do a much better job of linking academic and skills and training with the needs of our labor market. We must create the new social compact that ensures that all jobs are quality jobs that offer living wages and provide good working conditions in ways that benefit workers, employers, and society. That is what we are called to do. That is economic prosperity. That is a healthy approach to education, and that becomes the pillar of a diverse democracy. So what does any of this mean for you as college leaders, and what do we need from you? We need you to be in conversation with us about what's happening on the ground, in your campuses, with your students, about what your communities need and how your colleges are in a position, or not, to help meet those needs. We're in the business of setting the conditions for state policy that allow you all to do your important work at the local level. But without a sharp, incisive, robust understanding of what those issues are, we can't get it right. So please help us understand what is happening programmatically, institutionally, and locally. Help us understand your needs so we can be of service, and help us to create a California for all. Thank you.
Well, that was a wow. Please join me in thanking Lande again. My goodness. You know, Lande, we're grateful for you spending time with us and sharing your thoughts, and very grateful to you and the administration for your understanding of and investment in the California State University. You know, none of us can really predict tomorrow or the next day precisely, but what we can commit to you and to the governor is we're in. And we will be partners, and we will be thought leaders, and we will listen and be persuaded, and we will persuade. And with that commitment, I think we'll go forward for a California for all. I do want to acknowledge Eloy Oakley, who is here today. Eloy is the Chancellor of the California Community Colleges, and as you know, one of our most vital partners in our ability to succeed in the CSU is those wonderful partnerships between our 23 campuses and the 173 million ones that Eloy is responsible for. You know, and during the course of yesterday and today, there were a lot of thanks given to a lot of people, but nobody has had the opportunity to say thank you to some other folks who I think I'll ask you to join me in thanking in just a moment. Of course, to Lauren Blanchard and to James Minor, to Sabrina Sanders and to Jeff Gold and Ed Sullivan, indeed to all of the folks in academic and student affairs, along with the event and communication folks from the Chancellor's office from Sacramento State, including students who have made this event, thought about it, organized it, and now are about 5 minutes away from finishing the execution of it. So please join me in thanking those good people for all their effort. So I'll be brief. I know there's planes to catch and roads to navigate and adult beverages again. I don't know why I'm fixating on that, but I want to thank the way you've leaned into the symposium this year. The energy level has really been through the roof. The grad talks, the breakout sessions, the informal conversations that I've witnessed or eavesdropped in on. It's indicative of your passion for what you do and who you are. As we adjourn, I want you to leave really with your head high and shoulders back. Let's reflect on our progress. And let's never lose track that each of you and all you represent that are here through video and may not join us at all, but are doing the heroes' work on our campuses, that your work matters. It helps elevate lives, it helps elevate families, communities, and it creates hope for literally hundreds of thousands of people every single day. So hold your head high, but tighten that jaw with a little more resolve. Our ambitious goals present the challenge of our times. Raising success measures for all of our students and getting rid of those pesky equity gaps is a work that we will stay with. It won't be easy. The goals are high, they're ambitious, but they're within our grasp. I mean, the data is clear. We're making progress, and as we heard this morning and again from Lande, we have a new governor. This governor believes in us, and he understands us, and the state is committed to our work. So this is our moment in time. So roll up our sleeves and seize it with that unity of purpose, and let's go after it with a redoubled effort. You know, as I think about the California State University, my inquisitiveness and curiosity often make me wonder whether we are correctly named. Now, this is not because I have a proclivity for wordsmithing, although there are days and moments when that may not be fair. But it enables me, when I think of the words we use about us, to think more deeply of purpose, of why, and of what we could, indeed what we should do differently. You may have heard me previously speak about us as Compassion State University. Compassion for each other and the issues that face us, and I still believe that's true. And this morning you heard our president and our governor about the importance as connected state university. Why every student finds in a personalized fashion academic substance, an inclusive and welcoming culture with faculty, staff, and students who both challenge and support, who inspire and who celebrate. And throughout these few days, we realized we must also be more bold, more courageous, to be Change State University, to adapting to, but even more importantly, creating the change that we need. It is hard, it is contentious, it is difficult work. Think about the discussions around executive orders. Think about discussions about quantitative reasoning. Think about discussions around general education, the cost of attendance, bending the cost delivery curve, et cetera, et cetera. Paraphrasing John Kennedy from my freshman year in high school, our challenge at CSU, this is a challenge we are willing to accept, unwilling to postpone, and we intend to win. That's supposed to be an applause line. So damn it, yesterday I said take 3 things home. And so Monday, next work day, I want you to take those 3 things and slap them down on campus and go after them. Be courageous, be bold, do something different, have fun. Build on the energy and momentum, not only of the last couple of days, but this is really a multi-year effort that we're in the middle of. And as you leave this afternoon, don't go. As you leave, I want you to know of my personal appreciation. This is really quite something, and it couldn't happen without you. So thanks for that. And oh yeah, one more C for CSU. Let's think about us as Confluence State University. Confluence. Mark my words. You are contributing to a once-in-a-career moment in this institution's history and in your professional life and in your student life. So I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Make sure your purse isn't valuable as you're close. And imagine that you are in Lewiston, Idaho, right on the Idaho-Oregon border, about 2/3 of the way up, maybe 150 miles south of the Canadian border. To the south are the Seven Devils Mountains. To the east are the Bitterroot Mountains. To the south are the Sawtooth Mountains. And to the west are the Blue Mountains. And coming together is the Clearwater River and the Snake River. They come together in Lewiston. A Clearwater River is named because it is a Clearwater River running through the Nez Perce lands, and comes together with the Snake River that actually starts in the Tetons, works its way down through the countryside, southern Idaho, and works its way back up north. The Clearwater and the Snake come together with many tributaries contributing along the way to create, ultimately, the magnificent Columbia River. And this confluence of rivers in this beautiful setting powers hydroelectric energy, fish and wildlife habitat, hospitality, tourism, recreation, agriculture, logistics, and weather. So now, open your eyes. We're not in that beautiful place, but maybe we are. Our place is equally beautiful. The confluence of 23 campuses is itself remarkable. But the once-in-a-career perspective comes because of a larger confluence of our time. We have need to build capacity, and we have demand to fill that capacity. We have demand for the value of our degrees in society. We have a healthy economy, and we have political clairvoyance, especially with our governor and our legislative leaders. The CSU is blessed with talent, top to bottom, left to right. And we have principled leadership in the Cal State Student Association, in the Academic Senate, in the trustees, our magnificent presidents and their teams, and of course, the secret sauce that we cannot simply do without, is our dedicated and capable staff. And finally, we have demonstrated to elected individuals, to the public, to business leaders, to ourselves, that with our focus and new investments and redirected existing investments, that we deliver. And what is it that we deliver? We deliver alumni with skills, knowledge, experience, and the swagger to lead, to stimulate not only the economy and to ascend socially, but to preserve and protect the planet. As the Clearwater and Snake, the confluence of those two rivers into the confluence with the Columbia, drives the Northwest, CSU's confluence powers California forward, and therefore this country and this world. Thank you very much.